Despite of whoever you are, whatever you do right now, you got to master that. And that is leadership.
Do what you believe is the best thing to do. And can I tell you, that was probably one of the most frightening things I've ever faced, because companies don't work like that. They just don't. There's got to be processes and systems. Time and time again, successful organizations are dissected, they're researched. And in every industry, there are some top flying companies. Every single industry, there is top flying companies that are doing really, really well. The leadership of those top flying companies are better, stronger, more focused, more purposeful. And then what keeps everyone else on average is that they can't see it. I've worked for some pretty dumb leaders at times, and it didn't serve me well to judge them. What I had to try and do is try and understand them and try and how can I work best with them to achieve goals for myself, because at the end of the day, we should be focused around what it is that we want to achieve with our leadership, but also how do I achieve results for the organization and
how we can make sure they succeed at the end of the day.
So if status is a thing, results is a thing, every leader's got something that's important. Even the leaders that just seem to be drifting through life is important for them to maintain motivation within their teams, care for them, develop some structures and consistency that shows that you're investing in them. And then quite likely that you will have a motivated team that enjoy coming to work and create a great culture and a performance-driven, purposeful results will come from that.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Living in Control podcast. I'm Reza Abraham, the author of In Control, the systematic approach to taking complete control of your life and career. And I'm also the co-founder of the In Control Group, an organization with a mission to help people become in control of every aspect of their life. We imagine a world where most people are in control of their life and career, a conscious life accompanied by conversion, contentment, and consistency. In today's podcast, we are going to talk about another pillar of living an in control life, which is called competency, which is the stepping stone to confidence. As I always say, your competent level is equal to your confident level. To build our competent level, there is one skill set that I strongly believe that everybody, despite of whoever you are, whatever you do right now, you got to master that. And that is leadership. Today, we have a tremendous guest who has spent over 30 years in operational leadership positions in the retail sectors, leading teams as large as 300 people and managing revenue up to $300 million US. He is also the author of Seriously Simple Stuff to Get You Unstuck, a very good friend of mine. Let's welcome Coach Tony Curl. Thank you for joining us, Tony.
It's my pleasure, Reza, and it's great to see you again. So since our interview, it's for my podcast, The Today's Leader, I've been really looking forward to doing this one with you for your podcast. So really excited.
Thank you, Tony. Tony, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you fall in love with leadership?
Well, I fell in love with leadership. So I had a 30-year retail career, and during that time, I've got to be truthful and say that leadership wasn't really one of those four things in front of mind as to how you get ahead. So when I started in my career, you were firmly judged on the length of time that you worked. So you needed to be the first one there, one of the last to leave, those sorts of things. And it was more about the sweat that you put into the role as opposed to any particular leadership disciplines that you had. And I guess that was just part of the times that it was you were measured on your work ethic as opposed to your leadership ability. And it wasn't until I shifted from the initial company that I started working with, I was with them for 15 years. And towards the end of that career with them, we started talking about leadership and we started doing leadership workshops. And it was really starting to fill a void that was in my mind, so to speak. And then I joined another company called Bunnings Warehouse here in Australia. And they were just really focused around leadership. And
Mm.
within the first 6 months of me starting my position with Bunnings, I had done more leadership workshops than what I had done in the previous 15 years.
Wow.
So there was a real focus and there was a real concerted effort for us to be the best leaders that we could possibly do. And understanding the concept of Bunnings was at that particular time, they were very strong on empowering their teams. So they didn't have a lot of processes. They didn't have a lot of systems. They employed people like myself who had retail leadership experience, bring them into the organization and said, this is your store. These are the few rules that we have. Do what you believe is the best thing to do. And can I tell you, that was probably one of the most frightening things I've ever faced, because companies don't work like that. They just don't. There's got to be processes and systems. But it's truly part of the reason why Bunnings is such one of the biggest organizations now in Australia and one of the most successful, because those early pioneers that were in part of that process really were empowered. And we had a ball. We just were able to utilize our strengths, our skills, and our experience and really drive ultimately what Bunnings is nowadays. So, so I guess that's my process around leadership. I then started developing myself through Maxwell leadership. They were looking at the John Maxwell team, it was known as the time, and I joined the John Maxwell team. And since then, 2013, I branched out on my own. I've been coaching and developing leaders ever since, and just really love what I do.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I think the part that just now you were mentioning about, like, for 15 years in one organizations, and they don't really pay a lot of attention to leadership things. And you know what? It's very interesting. Still, you will find a lot of companies that they don't really invest in building their leaders, you know. And just like, you know, even sometimes when we go to very big organizations, like large organizations, multinational companies, you will see that they have no idea how leadership pipeline in an organization works. It means that people actually moving towards the passages of leadership without making any change in their competency, in their time application, and in the values that they need to have, right? So I'm sure you still have seen like companies that they just don't simply do that. How often do you face like these kind of organizations?
I think that I saw some research recently that showed to me that succession in organizations, 30% of people that get promoted are promoted based on performance. 70% are promoted based on relationships. And of course, relationship building is a leadership skill.
Yeah.
And we know that. But one of them. But also is the accountability of performance. That's part of the leadership framework as well.
Yeah.
So there's always a differentiating advantage for organizations that focus in on developing better leaders. And we know that, and we see that, and there's so much research that indicates that. But a lot of organizations can't see the wood for the trees. You know, they've got to where they are based on how they've done things. So where they are now is how they've done things from the past. It's a result of what they've done.
Yep.
But then for them to reach the upper echelon within their industry, within their beating their competitors, that's going to take the next level leadership. And that frightens so many organizations. So what if I develop my leaders and invest in them and we still don't get there? Well, you know, so because they've got those doubts and those fears, it actually stops the whole process.
Correct.
And that's one of the challenging things that organizations have to work through. But time and time again, successful organizations are dissected, they're researched. And in every industry, there are some top flying companies. Every single industry, there is top flying companies that are doing really, really well. There's a whole range of organizations that sit there on the midline, on the average. And then there is a raft of companies that sit well below average. One of the differences is always leadership. The leadership of those top flying companies are better, stronger, more focused, more purposeful. And then what keeps everyone else on average is that they can't see it. And it's an unfortunate thing.
So when you say leadership, Tony, you are referring to what part of the leadership in a company? Because sometimes, I mean, I personally, whenever I talk about leadership, I try to break it into two main parts. Yeah. So one is the upper management, which is basically like, senior management team and then the board and whatever. But then the big bulk of leadership in a company is always the middle management, right? So always, let's say, like leading from the middle. And then you have like an individual contributor down there, right? So when you're referring to the word leadership, you're referring to which side, top or the middle?
It's an interesting question, because there is a limit in my mind as to what the upper leadership can do within most organizations.
Exactly.
And the leader that is most influential on the people delivering the service, providing the customer service, providing the client service, doing the grassroots, the frontline work, is always the leader that they report to. So that is the leader that is most influential in any organization.
The middle,
the one that you're reporting to. So it could be a frontline leader, it could be a middle manager leader. Now, that doesn't say the CEO has no accountability. Of course, they've got accountability. They've got to drive accountability down through the organization. They've got to align people to the purpose and the goals and the mission of the organization. But ultimately, what I see in the development of leaders is that the ones that are most responsible for the performance of the organization, which is the one that you report to, are the ones that we develop the least.
Correct.
So, and once again, research indicates the amount of money that's spent or invested in frontline leaders or middle managers is such a reduced amounts that we spend on CEOs, for example. So the money that we spend on a CEO, I think it's about 10% from some of the research that I've seen. And that's just wrong. That's just wrong. So companies need to be looking at who are the leaders that are most influential in our organization.
Correct.
And they are traditionally the ones that the people delivering the services are reporting to. So that's where we really need, for an organization to thrive, it needs to have a visionary leader. It needs to have someone inspirational on top, someone who's a bit of a strategist, someone who can clearly communicate, build alignment that people look up to. But then that message needs to be driven at all levels of the organization. It's a common thread. It's consistency of message. It's all of those things. And
correct.
And if we don't develop those leaders, that message gets filtered and swayed by bias and opinions and other people's theories. And then we've got people on the floor that just do not know what it is that they should be doing. I call it corporate haze. We see it everywhere. Corporate haze, where people just don't know what it is that they should be doing that's going to benefit and build the business.
I see. Yeah. So this is like, just now when you were mentioning it, there was so many questions pops up in my head, because one of the most important elements that you mentioned is like the importance of the communication. Yeah. So communication is always like really super important in the whole leadership zone. There was this quote that I don't know who said this, but they were saying like, in a traditional leadership, they used to always say like, without vision, people will perish. I mean, this is something that they teach us in every religion as well, right? And then they say it in a modern leadership, we teach that without people, vision will perish too. It means that if the people doesn't support the visions that those senior management team, the board people come up with, right? At the end of the day, when it's not communicated well, and these people doesn't support it backward, it would never work. So what big questions that I often get, I mean, I personally, I am all with what you said. And I always say like, when the middle management gets better, the whole organization gets better. That's it. The success of an organization is always directly related to the quality of the middle management in an organization. But here's the thing. Here's the big question. I get this question from middle managers themselves. They said, Reza, I know I am very important. I know I need to improve my leadership. But you know what? My boss, my CEO, my senior management team, they don't really believe in leadership. and they don't really like showcase a great leadership as well. And, you know, I'm pretty confident you have came across this question before.
Yeah.
I think my boss need to attend this training.
Yeah.
You know, I am very sure you have come across this one before. My boss need to attend this training. This is a very good topic for my boss, right?
Yeah.
So what do you say to those people who struggle with that area? I mean, that is something like, how can we help those people?
Yeah, and then once again, I'm just going to go step it back a bit. And once again, that's a direct relationship back to the leader that's most influential for you is the one that's reporting, that you report to. And in this case, you've got middle managers that are reporting to a more senior manager who, you know, for whatever their makeup is, they don't necessarily see them modeling the behaviors, doing what's required. And, you know, whether we call them bad leaders, you know, part of the thing that I try and work with leaders is we move away from judgment. So, you know, I've worked for some pretty dumb leaders at times, and it didn't serve me well to judge them. What I had to try and do is try and understand them and try and how can I work best with them to achieve goals for myself, because at the end of the day, we should be focused around what it is that we want to achieve with our leadership, but also how do I achieve results for the organization and
how we can make sure they succeed at the end of the day. Yeah.
So one of the biggest things that I always try, and, you know, when I was in leadership myself, but also as I work with leaders now, dealing with a bad leader or someone who's not totally aligned with our leadership principles, values, culture, or, you know, maybe just passing the time. I mean, there's a whole range of things that leaders can do that really irritate us when we're reporting to them. But one of the key things is to understand what is important for them, right? So what we often see in leaders is that they'll subscribe to a couple of things that make them feel good. So whether it's a status thing, for example, whether it's a control thing, whether it's, you know, relationship building, there is always something that leader knows is important to them. So for you to understand what is important for that leader is the first step in solving this puzzle for yourself. So if you know that they're keen on their status, they don't like seeing their status evolved, or they don't want surprises when they're presenting to the board or when they're presenting in their leadership groups or executive meetings, you know that as their direct report. So you do everything that you possibly can in relationship to that status scenario. You don't want your leader to look bad, so you're working with them. And every time you communicate with them, you're communicating the fact that you know that status is important. So how you phrase that is going to be directly based on the relationship that you have with them. But it's almost like you're saying, I know looking good is important for you. So we need to make sure that what we do here is going to put you in the best possible light. So, and that's going to help that leader, that individual leader, actually understand what is going to work in that relationship with their direct report. So if status is a thing, results is a thing, every leader's got something that's important. Even the leaders that just seem to be drifting through life is important for them. So the leader who's reporting to them needs to understand that. Now they're not going to say, yeah, I can see you're pretty lazy and that you're drifting through this, but you may be using words like, I can understand that you want us to be really autonomous, but for us to, you know, phrasing the words in that respect. So we need to understand what's important to them, and that's the step one. And then
so it means that it could be through like an observation from the leader, like how the leader make decision, or maybe you can just ask the leader, like, you know, what's exactly the expectation you have for me, right?
Yeah, and often you'll pick it up really quickly. If you're reporting to a new leader, very, very quickly you will pick up what's important to them.
If you're a good observant too.
Yeah,
because there are some people, they're not a good observant. They're not conscious about it.
Yeah, true. And but listen to the words they say in meetings. So, things like this result's really important for us, or I'm aiming to get that corner office with the car park next to the door. You start picking up things from what they say and then subscribing it back. Or worst case scenario, it means you've actually got to go talk to them and have a bit of a conversation and build some rapport. And that's always something that's always beneficial anyway. So to really understand what's important, I then talk to them about trying to lighten their load so that you become someone that they rely on. Now, and then the final step, obviously, is to be staying true to yourself and being authentic. Now, the key is if you can be doing the right things for the bad boss, it's going to make it creates an environment where you may advance over and above your boss. Or worst case scenario, your boss advances and then he realizes the work that you've done, so he pulls you through the chain as well. So, which doesn't solve the problem. You're still then working with a bad boss, but you're going to be in a higher position. So, understand what's important, phrase language when you're speaking with them around what is important for them. And then, of course, staying true and authentic to yourself. So there's some of the key little bits of advice that I would probably be sharing with anyone that comes to me with a bad boss.
Yeah, these are really awesome. I think what you pointed out is like one of the lessons that I've learned many years ago from one of my leadership mentors. He said, the most important things that you need to know about your boss is that how your boss make decision. And that was so amazing, So he gave me like a lot of examples, like, some leaders, they just want to know how to make money, save money. Some leaders, they're only focused about like increasing productivity. Some leaders, like what you said, they're very focused about status, they just want to be seen. They just want to be loved, they just want to be like pointed out, like anything happened, it's like, yeah, you're the man, you did it, And I believe, like you mentioned about John C. Maxwell, he had these very interesting things, right? One of his teaching, he was saying like, there are 3 things you need to know about every man, every person you work with. What makes you happy? What makes you sad? What you always dream about, right? So asking that 3 questions will help you to really understand the person better. Absolutely. But I want to press you a little bit on this further down.
Yeah.
So knowing what your boss like, knowing how his expectation is, knowing what he cares about, it's important for you to build a relationship with that person. But what about my leader? The problem that I have with him is not like I don't know how to make relationship with my boss. I know how to manage my boss. I know what he cares about. And I know how to influence my superior as well. But the problem is that he has a lot of bad traits, bad things about leadership. Like example that I came across very often when I'm talking to leaders is that the leaders actually who raise their voice, who scold people in public, or use a lot of like F word when in the middle of the meeting, it's like so embarrassing, Reza. I really don't know how to deal with this guy. What do you say to those people?
There are going to be, we're going to meet those people in all aspects of our lives. And unfortunately, we are going to come across them as we go through our careers. Now, fortunately, they're becoming less and less. But what that indicates, if there is, aggression, or if there is, foul language, it indicates to me that person, that leader, is feeling some level of pressure somewhere. And once again, it's about trying to understand that. So where's that pressure coming from? What is it that they're feeling? And how can I get, or well, maybe the first question is, should I support that particular person? Because most organizations are going to have some form of process through human resources where that particular behaviors, or if they're totally inappropriate, they're totally inappropriate. So whether they're your boss or whatever, anyone dropping F-bombs in meetings with mixed meetings at multiple levels is certainly inappropriate behavior, and that inappropriate behavior should be spoken about. Many people just put up with it because they don't believe that people will understand or believe them, or that the leader's they've got power. So if it's inappropriate, it's inappropriate, and that should be drawn to the attention. Now, one of the things that I once again I coach is a concept of coaching courage. And I want every leader to have courage predominantly for feedback.
Oh yeah.
So if you have a leader that is inappropriately dealing with things or getting aggressive, often, well, maybe sometimes they're not even aware.
This is their own blind spot.
Yeah, it could be a blind spot that they've got. They may not be aware that what they're saying is inappropriate. It may have been how they've role modeled and got through the organization.
Exactly. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what that leader needs to have is the courage of their convictions. Now, if it's happening in a meeting, you're not going to create a public, I would advise firmly against making it a public thing, because that's only going to often make this situation worse. But what you should be doing is having the opportunity to sit down with that particular leader, even though you report to them, and just say, hey, look, I feel this is inappropriate and I don't believe it was called for. Now, when a person is dealing with that calmly one-on-one, often, and I've seen this happen more often than not, the leader will say, oh, I wasn't aware, I'm really sorry, and it won't happen again. And if that addresses the behavior, that's awesome. But sometimes, because it's an established practice, it doesn't address the behavior. And then that's the process that we need to be looking at, escalating it through the HR. Just be mindful that HR is obviously part of the senior leadership, mostly of organizations. But if it's inappropriate behavior, it's inappropriate behavior. And as the world becomes more and more inclusive, and diversity is absolutely embraced by organizations, leaders' behaviors need to shift. And if that's been part of the reason how you've got to your status within the organization, someone has to have the courage to address that and fix that. Now, the funny thing here, Razor, is that often companies won't want to deal with that internally, so they'll bring in an external consultant, give them like
been there, done it before,
like me and you, and they'll give the independent consultant a bit of a scenario and say, we need to work on him. They won't dive into too much detail usually, and then expect miracles from that particular consultant. But it needs to be dealt with within the organization. And the mentoring that leader needs to get is probably the most important thing. So,
correct.
So courage is,
I love it,
absolutely paramount. And if you're a leader that's got a team of leaders, and you want to be getting feedback that you need to get to actually drive your leadership better, you need to develop and coach that courage within the team that report to you, so that they're going to give you the feedback that you need. So if you do step out of line or cross it every now and again, and those sorts of things do happen on the odd occasion, you might raise your voice out of frustration or something. You want your team to be the one that's giving you that feedback and say, hey, look, Tony, just so you know, I think you're a bit too aggressive in our meeting, because that's the feedback that you need to get as a leader. So you need to coach courage in the people that report to you.
And that is actually the courage of the leader too.
Because, absolutely.
Just like asking for feedback from other people, it requires a lot of courage, and if you are a charismatic leader, that is hard,
It can be completely confronting for a leader, and
ego, their ego as well.
Often I'll be working with a group and I'll say to them, who loves feedback? And of course, everyone in the group says, oh, yes, I love feedback. And then I normally just let them sit for a bit, and I just let silence go over them. And then all of a sudden you'll get some person in the group, often, who says, when it's good. And then that's our starting point. Okay, everyone loves feedback when it's good. So how do we deal with the feedback when we may not perceive it as being so good? And we start working through some of those leadership and feedback practices.
I met leader, Tony, who told me once, I rather fire someone than giving feedback.
Truly.
Oh, yeah.
That's horrible.
It means that feedback actually is not something that is hard to receive. It is also sometimes very hard to give. But to just pack what you said just now, it was really awesome. I like the whole steps and the things that you put forward. So I like the angle that you brought it up, because you talk about courage, and I always believe that courage is one of the main pillar of building your leadership. Because if you don't have the courage to get out of your comfort zone, do something you have never done before, you would never become a good leader, right? So that's one of the big part of the leadership. And the way I always like wrap it when I'm going with the people who ask me that questions, I go around the whole idea of like in control and out of my control. So the part which is in your control is exactly the part that you mentioned about giving feedback. So because that is something that you can do it to anybody, your subordinate, your superior. It's a part of crucial conversations that you need to have it. And a lot of people, they don't have that courage. They don't know how to do it. They really don't know how to do it. They say, I would love to give it, but you know what? My boss doesn't want to receive feedback. So then I always tell them, like, no, perhaps the method that you're using to give the feedback is wrong. Or maybe you approach it in a wrong timing, meaning that the person is not yet ready to receive the feedback from you, because you can't just open the door and say like, hey, I want to share with you this feedback. It just doesn't work like that, Finding the right timing. Sometimes you guys just got to ask the person, like, may I share with you some feedback? Is it a good timing for me to share with you some feedback? And if the person say, nope, you can ask them like, so when would be the best time to do that? The person say, never. Then you can actually drop them an email. You can drop them an email. Say like, because sending an email is like nothing. And here's the thing. If you give the feedback to the person and the person still not improving, is nothing is happening, then like what you said, you said that, you're going to approach the HR, maybe you can share with them. But you know what? I even go one step further than that. You know what I always tell people? If you really mean the day that you cannot honor your leader is the day that perhaps you need to leave that organization.
It's an interesting point. And you've raised, feedback's just such a minefield for leaders, because, we know that, well, we tell ourselves we want it. We've got to gear ourselves up for it. And interesting, when you were talking about the timing of receiving feedback, and an interesting case in point and real life is that I had an operations manager that reported to me, and we went through a period of challenges in the store that we had. And every time he was sharing something with me, it was always like, it wasn't great. And, finally there was I'm certainly not proud of the reaction that I had in one of the bits of feedback he was providing. But the next day we got together, because I wasn't proud of what I'd done, but also I didn't want him to be in a position where he wasn't going to give me feedback. So we created our own sort of feedback scenario, and we would always go to each other and say, are you up for receiving some feedback? I'm not quite sure of the exact words, but it was very similar to what you talked about. And the interesting thing we found, and this is something that your audience may really take on, once you've got that set up in place. Now, we gave ourselves permission to say no. We gave ourselves permission to say, no, I'm not in the right space for some feedback. However, what the reality of what happened is that once I had, in my case, and I suppose in James's case as well, once we had the situation where, are you up for some feedback? Both of us seemed to take this deep breath and say, this is good for me. I need to hear it. Yes, I am. I'm up for some feedback. There was not one time we deferred, because just that asking that question in itself allowed us both to set our mind to receive the feedback and deal with it effectively and improve either ourselves as leader or the performance of the store. So really interesting experience that I had, because if I am giving someone permission that they can say no, But what they're actually doing is taking a breath and saying, I know this is important for me.
Yeah.
And actually receiving the feedback. See, one of the things I used to, and more predominantly when I worked as a leader, is I would always make sure that my teams understood that feedback is a gift, but it's how we wrap that gift that's really going to make the difference for the people. But I also, and one of the things that I often saw in leaders that reported to me was that they were reluctant to give feedback because of the way the team member would, people get defensive.
Yes.
They'd react and so we implemented what we knew as the feedback rule. So if someone came up to you and said, hey, I want to give you some feedback, for the person receiving the feedback, the only thing they had to do was smile, listen, and say thank you. That's it. They didn't have to respond. They didn't have to defend. But smile, listen, and say thanks. And what that enabled people to do, if they felt themselves getting angry with the feedback, they didn't have to respond. They didn't have to react. Smile, listen, say thanks. And then we would encourage someone who was getting emotional about it to say, can we catch up tomorrow when I've had a chance to think about it? And it just smoothed out that whole process. And all of a sudden, we've got people providing feedback, which is great because people are getting better and the results are getting better. So there's a couple of little tips there.
So like for example, in my practice, I always tell people that when you want to give a feedback to someone, of course, we use these models of you have to describe the situations, what are the behaviors you've been observing, and what's the impact you're getting. And one very big part of giving and receiving feedback is also the feed forward. Because most people, they just give feedback, they don't give a feed forward. It means what is your expectation from that person? Which we use these methods that I always use whenever I give a feedback to people is I wonder, I like this part of the things that you have done. I like that part of the things you have done. I wonder whether you can improve it in that area. And that makes it very interesting. So here's the thing, meaning that education actually needs to happen, like what you said, at both sides, the person who receive it and the person who is giving it. Like I love the fact that you just mentioned that smile, listen, and say thank you, right? So listening is the biggest part of the feedback, because most people, they listen to reply. They don't listen to really acknowledge, validate, empathize, which we always use this mirroring method. It's okay, let me see if I got it. So you're saying this. Did I get it? And then the person say yes. And then you say thank you for giving the feedback. And I'm really sorry for making you feel that way, not if I make you feel that way. Because the moment you say, if that makes you feel that way, it doesn't going to help the person. So it's really interesting, the way you give it. So another very interesting topic here is that what is how to this is one of the common questions that I often get, especially nowadays because of this whole COVID situation, right? So you're dealing with a lot of people who are demotivated. So they're just feeling down, it's and because of this whole anxiety and stress that exists in everywhere you are, whether you're working from home or whether you're working from the. So what kind of advice do you give to leaders in order to keep their team up? That is something very important. I mean, what are the latest hacks you found that it works when it comes to getting your team up, working back again?
I'm not sure if there's any particular hacks here, Razor. I think one of the key things that as a leader we should acknowledge is that there are going to be days where we feel down, and there are going to be days that our team feel down, right? So we need to acknowledge that. Now, I always talk about leaders being on show. So the minute I walk into my place of business, the minute I walk into my team, I'm on show. So if I'm in a bad mood, everyone's going to be in a bad mood. If I'm feeling down and depressed,
everybody's down.
Everyone's down and depressed.
Maxwell used to joke about this. He used to say when you become a leader, you don't have the right to be demotivated.
I fully agree. So you're on show, so you need to understand that. So, and that's going to hopefully make us intentional with our behaviors and the way that we, I suppose, we're intelligent with our own emotions. When our team are down, I think one of the key things that I would be sharing with leaders is the biggest thing that you can do as a leader is to show your team that you care. So whether they're individuals or as a team, because I haven't met anyone yet who wants to let someone down who cares about them. So when you have genuine care for your team, and I'm not meaning you give them hugs or anything, there is a genuine care about them in the role that they do, the important role that they play, their own development, how you challenge and stretch them, how you understand and build rapport. You know, all of those things are indicating genuine care. How you invest your time in helping them be better. So when someone knows that someone cares, it's very unlikely that they're going to get to the stage where they are that totally demotivated, that they're not doing what's needed. Now, feedback's another way, but it's interesting you mentioned this because I had a program that I used to work through with organizations, and it was called Motivating the Working Dead. And it was really based the working dead. So motivating the working dead, right? And because we do have people, unfortunately, in organizations that have been allowed to just do what they feel that they need to do because they're just too much trouble to deal with. So they're put in a little box and allowed to be a real negative influence. And unfortunately, you see that in far too many companies. So motivating the working dead was all based around four really simple concepts. It was called when, as humans, when we subconsciously release energy, we do it under four pretexts, under four conditions. One is when we're in danger. One is when we find something interesting. Another is when we find something pleasurable. And then the last one is when something is important. So when we understand that, so that's when, as a human, we're going to release subconscious energy. So of course, when we're in danger, that's our survival, that's our fight or flight mode. When something is interesting, and I'm sure you've been in a situation where you're reading something or you're attending a museum and you're just so caught up in, because everything's so interesting, that all of a sudden you look at your time and you say, where'd those 3 hours get to, you know? Pleasure is about, you know, in many cases, the basic biology of populating the planet.
Yeah.
But importance is one of those really key things. But each and every one of those you can relate back to a workplace strategy. So for interest, of course, when you're recruiting, you want people that are interested in what you do. So your questions, you need to have some bulletproof questions in your recruitment process that can determine that. Something that's important. So you need to align the person's role to the importance and the overall aim of the business. And when people realize that they're doing something that's important, they're not just a cog in the wheel, it can really change that motivational aspect. Pleasure is more about job culture and satisfaction in the workplace, so people enjoy coming to work. And if none of those things fail, yeah, okay, let's do the danger thing. Let's do performance management structures, et cetera, et cetera. The problem with danger, and a lot of leaders that prey on fear, I guess, more so than anything else, is that danger is only a short-lived thing. So if you're back in the ancient times and you were chased by a saber-toothed tiger, now you could probably run really quickly for about 100 meters or so, or maybe even a kilometer, but there is going to come a time where your energy runs out. It's short-lived. And we see this time and time again when we're trying to fix or resolve problem issues or performance issues with our team. It's short fix. Someone says, oh my God, I'm in danger of losing my job. I need to buckle up. And they might do it for a week or 2 weeks, maybe even a month. But then if the leader doesn't continually follow up with that particular person, they're back in their old habits and trends.
Yeah.
So when leaders are struggling if their teams are struggling from a motivational aspect, think about those four key things. Think about how you care and how you invest in your team. Think about your own consistency as a leader. Are you investing time in your people? I encourage every leader to book in 15-minute time slots with their team on a regular basis where they just talk about them. And, not about KPIs, not about goals. How are you going and what is it that you're working on? And when people see that, and that we as a leader, develop empathy around what's going on in their life, that's probably some of the best things a leader can do to maintain motivation within their teams. Care for them, develop some structures and consistency that shows that you're investing in them. And then quite likely that you will have a motivated team that enjoy coming to work and create a great culture and a performance-driven, purposeful results will come from that.
Yep, that's really true, because the how we define the leadership itself. Leadership obviously is all about influence, and the influence only will happen when we have that really genuine interest to help people, and you really mean it. So that's why it raised one of those questions that we often get. We often tell people that you need to be an inspiration. You have to inspire people, and people always ask so how do you do that? So we always say it's not that hard. All you need to do, you got to make sure you walk the talk, you talk the talk, you talk the walk, and you walk the talk. It means that your action, your words, and your thoughts have to sync. So you can't just say something, but then deep inside you're thinking differently, because people can understand. And this is something that you can't actually hide it from them. Then that's very important. So genuine interest, something very interesting you mentioned. The other one that you mentioned is about identifying exactly what the persons really care about. So that required that 4 elements that you mentioned, which is was pretty interesting to look at it. So that's these are really cool stuff. And so the last questions that I want to ask you is that I believe that every one of us, we are where we are in our leadership is because of somebody has impacted our leadership skills. So who do you think of that inspired you to become who you are as a leader, and why?
I've got a leader that really stands out in this for me. Well, I've got 2. The first one is me, and I don't mean that in a boastful way. What's inspired me is a lot of the mistakes that I made as a leader, and what I took from them, and how I learned from them, and how I made myself better. So I think that that's really, for every leader out there, some of their greatest inspiration is going to come from the mistakes that they make, if they're vulnerable enough to admit them. So as we know, some leaders don't admit their mistakes, and that's okay for them. That's the way that they want to be. But I'm quite happy and open with the mistakes I've made. And every time I've made one, I've made myself better along the way. But the gentleman that had the most impact on me, and it's quite a long story, so I'll try and bring it down shorter. I always talk about pivotal years. Every one of us will, if we want to make positive change in our life, or we've made positive change in our life, you can always look back on a pivotal year, a year that has been a foundation of where that has come from. So whether it's writing a book, books don't happen overnight, unfortunately. Everyone's got a great book in them, but when they realize it's going to take a couple of years to write the thing, maybe it's not going to come out. But there's always a pivotal year, and 1995 was a pivotal year for me. And I had a young family. We just we'd moved back into a major city here in Queensland, and I had a leader that wasn't my direct leader, it was his direct leader, that showed absolute support and encouragement in what I wanted to achieve. And so I came back into the major city under the guise of advancing my career. So the company pretty much told me, it's not going to happen where you are, you need to get back here. So I did that. And I had a leader that believed in me and supported me. His name was Steve Smith. And we set goals at the beginning of the year, and during the course of the year kept up constant. It was consistent. So once a month he'd touch base, he'd reach in. Now, I'm not reporting to him. I'm reporting to someone that reports to him. So he was investing in me to catch up with me and find out how I'm going and what I'm doing. And, and it wasn't all just chocolates and roses. There was some, what's challenging you at the moment, what's frustrating you. And so it was a really positive mentoring. But at the end of that year, I will always remember that phone call that he gave to me and said, Tony, this is your next position. And it was the one that we had aimed for at the beginning of the year based on everything that had come through. So a really pivotal year for me. It was probably the hardest that I've ever worked in, because I had that purpose, I had that vision, I had that real focus, and my leader supported me every step of the way, or my mentors supported me every step of the way. And then ultimately the achievement was there. And, that was, you just remember where you are in those times where someone follows through with you and says, hey, mate, you've had a great year. This is where you're going. This is your new salary. And here's your company car. And I'm just going, my God, thank you. So Steve obviously had a major impact, but it was the support, the encouragement, and everything that went on. He didn't have to do that. He took that on, and it was an amazing year for me. I've had some other times in my career. I've had great mentors. I've had great leaders that I've worked with. I've also had really poor ones, and you learn from them all. And interesting. I hope I can just. I know that we're getting close to time, but I do a lot of work within the DISC framework, the DISC.
Oh yeah, DISC
framework, and a lot of people talk about the D style leader, that dominant leader, the one that's focused on results and bullet points and very short, and there have been certain times in my career where I am so thankful I worked with a D style leader who gave me the bit of a rev up that I needed and to reshift my focus on what was really important, because too often we say, oh, those leaders, they're really tough to work with, they're challenging, but geez, they can help you when you really need them. So there's been a couple of times I've had some strong Ds, and if they're listening to this, I'll know exactly who they are. And they've readjusted where I was and said, no, we're focusing wrong, Tony. This is where you need to go. And it needs to start now. And I'd say, okay, let's do it. So,
No, I love the way you put it. Actually, the way you started it, that I completely agree with you. If I want to say that also, perhaps like now that you share that, I'm thinking of the same thing. It's like, I want to thank me, so because you see, like I have met a lot of people, Tony, that they had great leaders, but they missed the chance. They missed the chance. They never actually show up to work. They never show up and toughen up and really do the work, right? Yeah. So they got lazy and they just missed the opportunity. The great people came there. They wanted to keep them under the wing, right? Yeah. And then say like, I can help you to grow, but they missed the chance. Yeah. So it's your fault. You are in control of that. You chose to be a better person. So you really deserve that, right? So that is really interesting. And just now you mentioned the story of the Steve. That is very inspiring. I mean, I love leaders who goes out of their way to help someone, and it got nothing to do for him, right? There is no benefit for Steve right here. It's just like, he's just a nice guy and taking someone under your wing. And I hope every one of us, actually, we can pay it forward. We can pay it forward. We can do it for somebody else, right? That's something that I am very, very committed into it. I always make sure I have like a few people. As much as my time allow me, it's like, I take them under my wing. I try to coach them as much as you can, right? Because somebody has done it for you. I am where I am because somebody has done it for me a long time ago. So now I have to pay it forward. That is part of the leadership too.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, Tony, thank you very, very much. Where can our people find you, Tony?
The best way that they could find me is via the Today's Leader podcast on all good podcast platforms. I speak to amazing people like yourself, Reza.
Thank you.
Each and every week. It's one of the most inspiring things that I do. It's part of my own personal growth and development. Every week I get to speak to someone who's going to challenge my thoughts, my ideas, my behaviors, my leadership, and it's just awesome. So the Today's Leader podcast, it's available at todaysleader.com.au, and my business is called Think and Grow Business, which is available at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. So I'm available on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, of course, Instagram. I'm there
everywhere.
and Coach Curl is also on TikTok. I'm not sure if I've got TikTok working exactly right at the moment, but if you do a search for Coach Curl or Tony Curl, you will find me. So, and I'd love to connect. Reach out. Let's have a chat.
Thank you, Tony. Guys, we hope this conversation has inspired you to know and learn more with us. As I always say, to live an in control life, you need to love what you do. You need to love who you're doing it with. You need to love who you're doing it for. And you need to love how are you doing it. So please tune in to our next podcast. As I always, we love to have you around. And thank you for listening to us. Thank you, Tony.
No worries. Thank you, Reza.
Thank you.